the swaying chair. I never believed in ghosts. Growing up in Boston, surrounded by the historical grandeur and bustling city life, tales of restless spirits and haunted libraries seemed like nothing more than old wives' stories meant to entertain children or scare the superstitious. My name is Clara Mitchell, and for the past 3 years, I've been working the night shift at the Harper Library, a venerable, century-old institution nestled in the heart of Massachusetts. The library was a treasure trove of knowledge, its vast collection of books spanning generations. But it was also a place steeped in history, with every corner whispering secrets of the past. The night shifts were the quietest, the hours stretching out in a tranquil silence that I found both soothing and isolating. My duties were simple: reorganize returned books, assist with late-night research requests, and ensure the building's security until the early morning staff arrived. The library's old architecture, with its grand staircases and echoing hallways, added to the serene yet eerie atmosphere that defined my nocturnal routine. Most nights, I enjoyed the solitude, losing myself in the pages of forgotten tomes or the rhythm of my tasks. But a few months ago, something changed. A subtle shift that I couldn't quite put my finger on until the incident that would forever alter my perception of the library. It was a chilly October evening, the kind where the crisp air carried the scent of fallen leaves and impending rain. I was shelving a stack of returned books in the philosophy section when I first heard it, a soft, rhythmic swaying sound emanating from the reference area. First, I dismissed it as the natural creaks and groans of the old building settling for the night. But as the minutes passed, the sound grew more distinct, a gentle yet persistent motion that seemed to come from a specific direction. Curiosity piqued. I followed the sound, my footsteps echoing softly against the marble floors. The reference area was dimly lit, the overhead lights casting long shadows between the towering shelves. As I approached the center of the room, the swaying sound became unmistakable, a chair moving back and forth in a slow, deliberate manner. There, in the middle of the reference desk, stood an antique wooden chair, its upholstery faded and worn by time. The chair was old, far older than any furniture I'd seen in the library, its intricate carvings hinting at a craftsmanship long lost to modern design. But what was unnerving was that the chair was swaying as if someone was sitting there. Yet the area around it was completely empty. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Is someone there?" There was no response. The chair continued to sway, the motion slow and almost graceful, yet deeply unsettling. I took a cautious step forward, reaching out to touch the back of the chair, hoping to dispel whatever illusion was playing tricks on me. But as my fingers brushed the worn fabric, the chair stilled abruptly, the silence returning with a sudden intensity, shaking off the unease. I decided to leave the reference area and return to my duties. But as I turned to walk away, a chill ran down my spine, a cold breath of air that seemed to pass right through me. I glanced back at the chair, half expecting to see it moving again, but it remained motionless, as still as a statue, determined to make sense of what I had witnessed. I continued my shift, the image of the swaying chair lingering in my mind. The rest of the night passed without incident, but the feeling of being watched never left me. Every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow flitting between the shelves or the faint outline of a figure standing by the windows. But each time, when I turned to look, there was nothing there. The next day, I confided in Sarah, a fellow librarian who had been working with me for over a year. She listened attentively, her brow furrowing with concern. "That chair has always been a bit odd," she said slowly. "It was donated a few years ago by one of the benefactors. They said it belonged to the original head librarian, Mr. Harold Whitaker." "Harold Whitaker?" I echoed, curiosity piqued. "I've never heard anyone mention him before." Sarah nodded. "He was a bit of an eccentric, always buried in his work. He passed away under mysterious circumstances a decade ago. Some folks around here still talk about the strange things that happened in the library around that time, things that no one could explain. I felt a shiver run down my spine as the pieces began to fit together. The swaying chair, the unexplained sounds, it all pointed to the restless spirit of Mr. Whitaker, unable to find peace after his untimely death. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the library's archives, poring over old records and newspaper clippings that detailed the history of the Harper Library and its enigmatic former head librarian. What I discovered was a tragic tale of obsession and loss. Mr. Whitaker had been a dedicated librarian, passionate about preserving the library's vast collection. But his dedication bordered on fanaticism, and he became increasingly reclusive, spending countless hours in the reference area, cataloging and reorganizing books with a fervor that bordered on madness. One stormy night, a fire broke out in the reference area, engulfing the section in flames. Despite the efforts of the night staff, Mr. Whitaker couldn't escape, succumbing to smoke inhalation and burns. The fire had been deemed an accident, but whispers of sabotage and foul play swirled in the aftermath. Though no evidence was ever found to support such claims, the incident left a scar on the library, and Mr. Whitaker's spirit was said to linger, his obsession with the library binding him to the very place he had dedicated his life to. The swaying chair, seemed, was a manifestation of his restless spirit, a haunting reminder of his tragic end. Armed with this knowledge, I felt a responsibility to help Mr. Whitaker find peace. That night, I returned to the reference area, determined to confront whatever was keeping his spirit tethered to the library. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, the minutes stretching into what felt like an eternity. I stood before the antique chair, my flashlight casting a narrow beam of light that danced across the room. "Mr. Whitaker," I called out softly, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. "I know you're here. I want to help you find peace." For a moment, nothing happened. The silence was deafening, the air thick with anticipation. Then, slowly, the chair began to sway once more, the motion gentle but deliberate. I took a deep breath, stepping closer, my hands clasped together in a gesture of respect. "I understand your dedication to the library," I continued, my voice unwavering. "But it's time to let go. Let the library thrive without you. Your work here is complete." The chair swayed more vigorously, the sound of wood scraping against wood filling the room. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping sharply as if the very essence of Mr. Whitaker's spirit was responding to my words. I felt a presence beside me, a weight pressing down on my shoulders, as if the old librarian was standing right next to me. "Thank you," a voice whispered, soft and fading. "I can finally rest." As the words left his lips, the chair stilled, the oppressive atmosphere lifting like a morning fog. The room felt lighter, the lingering tension replaced by a serene calm. I stood there for a moment, absorbing the peace that had settled over the reference area, knowing that I had played a part in helping a restless spirit find closure. The following nights were different. The sounds of the swaying chair ceased. The eerie presence that had haunted me disappeared, and the library felt warmer, more welcoming. The history of Mr. Whitaker remained a solemn reminder of the past, a testament to the lengths we go to preserve and honor those who came before us. But sometimes, late at night when the wind howls through the tall windows and the moon casts long shadows across the library floors, I catch a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, a fleeting shadow, a soft whisper of a smile, reminding me that the echoes of the past never truly fade. The Harper Library, with its grand halls and endless shelves, holds more stories than any of us can imagine, some of which linger in the shadows, waiting to be remembered and respected. So, if you ever find yourself working the night shift in a quiet, historical place, listen closely to the whispers carried by the wind. Respect the stories of those who have lost their way. Honor their memories, and understand that some spirits seek only acknowledgement to finally rest in peace. For in the heart of solitude, the echoes of the past linger, forever watching, forever remembering. Story number 2. The Mirror's Shadow. I never believed in ghosts. Growing up in the sunny suburbs of Tampa, Florida, I was more concerned with the tangible aspects of life: school, friendships, and eventually, the steady paycheck that came with my job as a night shift cleaner at Mariner's Cove restaurant. The establishment was a quaint, family-owned place nestled near the waterfront, known for its seafood and warm, inviting atmosphere during the day. But at night, it transformed into a quiet, almost eerie space, perfect for my solitary shifts. My name is Jake Thompson, and for the past 2 years, I've been the sole night cleaner at Mariner's Cove. The job was straightforward: scrub floors, wipe down tables, empty trash, and ensure the restaurant was spotless by the time dawn broke. The hours were long and monotonous, but I enjoyed the peace that came with working alone in the stillness of the night. Most nights, I found solace in the routine: the rhythmic scrubbing of the floor, the faint hum of the refrigerator, and the occasional drip from the sink were my only companions. I'd often lose myself in thoughts, contemplating life's big questions or reminiscing about better days. But a few months ago, something changed, something that shattered my skepticism and plunged me into a nightmare I couldn't escape. It started subtly. I began to feel a presence behind me as I worked, a chill that ran down my spine despite the warm Florida nights. First, I dismissed it as the result of fatigue or my imagination playing tricks on me. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing shift. I'd catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, shadows flitting across the walls, always just beyond my direct line of sight. One particularly humid October night, the air thick with the scent of salt and seafood. I was deep into my cleaning routine. The restaurant was silent, the only sounds being the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboards and the distant crash of waves against the shore. I was focused on scrubbing the tiles in the main dining area when I felt it again, a presence, cold and unnerving, pressing against my back. I turned swiftly, heart pounding, flashlight in hand, expecting to see a coworker or perhaps a prankster. But the dining area was empty, save for the shadows dancing under the dim overhead lights. I exhaled slowly, trying to calm my racing heart. Probably just my imagination, I muttered to myself, returning to my task. As the night wore on, the feeling intensified. Each time I glanced over my shoulder, the sense of being watched grew stronger. I started to hear faint whispers, barely audible, like the soft murmur of distant voices. My nerves were on edge, every sound amplified in the oppressive silence of the empty restaurant. Around 2 a.m., exhaustion had set in, and I was struggling to keep my eyes open. I decided to take a short break, heading to the small kitchenette to grab a glass of water. As I leaned against the counter, the temperature seemed to drop sharply, my breath visible in the sudden chill. I heard it then, a soft, childlike giggle echoing from the direction of the main dining area. My pulse quickened. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice wavering with a mix of fear and fatigue. The giggling stopped as abruptly as it had started, leaving me in a heavy silence that felt suffocating. I grabbed my flashlight and headed back into the dining area, determined to confront whatever was haunting me. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty tables and chairs. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the room, every shadow seeming to hold a hidden menace. That's when I saw it, a reflection in the large, ornate mirror hanging above the bar. A man stood behind me, his features obscured by the darkness, his eyes hollow and devoid of life. My blood ran cold as I spun around, but there was no one there. The restaurant was empty, the mirror reflecting only my own terrified face. "Hello," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Is someone there?" The reflection remained unchanged, the man's eyes still fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I reached out a hand, tentatively touching the mirror, hoping to dispel the apparition, but my fingers met only cold, smooth glass. I stumbled backward, heart racing, As the room seemed to close in around me, the whispers returned, louder this time, filling the space with a cacophony of ghostly voices. Shadows danced wildly across the walls, and the air grew thick with an oppressive force that made it difficult to breathe. Desperate to escape, I ran towards the exit, my footsteps echoing through the empty halls. But as I reached the front door, it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me as I tried to push it open, but it remained firmly closed, the handle immovable. The whispers grew louder, turning into anguished cries that reverberated through the restaurant. I turned back to face the mirror, now seeing the man's reflection distorted, his form wavering like smoke. "Don't leave me," the voice seemed to plead. The words etched into my mind with a force that left me trembling, summoning every ounce of courage. I grabbed my phone and dialed Pete, the manager who usually handled emergencies. "Pete, I need help," I gasped, my voice shaking. "Something's wrong here. There's someone in the mirror, and the door won't open." There was a long pause on the other end before Pete responded. "Jake, calm down. I'm sending someone to check it out. Just stay where you are." But as I waited, the presence in the mirror grew more aggressive, the man's form solidifying into a grotesque parody of a human. His eyes, black voids, bore into my soul, and his mouth twisted into a silent scream that echoed in my ears. I backed away, tripping over my own feet and falling to the ground. The door finally gave way, swinging open to reveal an empty hallway. The man in the mirror screamed silently as I scrambled to my feet and bolted out into the night, the oppressive force lifting as I ran into the cool, crisp air. I didn't stop until I was several blocks away, gasping for breath and drenched in sweat. The memory of that night haunted me, the image of the faceless man etched into my mind. I quit my job the next day, unable to bear the fear and the relentless feeling of being watched. Months passed, and I tried to move on, but the experience left a lasting scar. I avoided late-night shifts and haunted myself with questions about what had happened at Mariner's Cove restaurant. I never returned, but the memories lingered, a constant reminder that some places hold secrets too dark to uncover and spirits too restless to find peace. One evening, while driving home from a late shift at another job, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw it, a fleeting shadow standing by the roadside, watching me as I passed by. My heart raced, and I swerved away, the image burning itself into my memory. I realized then that the past never truly stays buried, that the echoes of forgotten souls can reach out and touch the living in the most unexpected ways. Mariner's Cove was just the beginning, a glimpse into a world where the living and the dead coexist in a fragile balance of fear and remembrance. Now, whenever I find myself alone in the quiet hours of the night, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see a shadowy figure standing behind me. The memory of that night at Mariner's Cove serves as a haunting reminder that some reflections hold more than just our own image. They hold the restless spirits of those who never found peace. So, if you ever find yourself working the night shift in a quiet, lonely place, listen closely to the whispers in the dark. Respect the stories of those who have lost their way. Honor their memories, and understand that some spirits seek only acknowledgement to finally rest. For in the stillness of the night, the echoes of the past linger, forever watching, forever remembering. Story number 3. Whispers in the Ward. I never believed in ghosts or the supernatural. Growing up in the bustling heart of Chicago, surrounded by the relentless energy of the city, tales of restless spirits and haunted places seemed like nothing more than bedtime stories meant to entertain or frighten. My name is Emily Hartman, and for the past 5 years, I've been a registered nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, a grand, old building that has stood for over a century on the city's south side. St. Mary's was a relic of another time, with its towering stone facades and long, echoing hallways. The hospital had seen thousands of patients pass through its doors, each leaving behind whispers of their stories in the creaking floors and faded wallpaper. I loved working there, despite its age and the occasional draft that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned staff. The sense of history comforted me, a reminder that we were part of something larger than ourselves. It was late October when the incident happened, the kind of night where the chill in the air seeped into your bones, and the wind outside howled like a wounded animal. I was assigned to the night shift in the East Wing, a section of the hospital that had been partially closed off due to renovations. Only a handful of patients remained on the floor, their rooms spaced far apart, leaving long stretches of empty corridors between them. The clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m. when I finally sat down at the nurse's station to catch my breath. The glow of the computer screen cast a pale light across the desk, illuminating stacks of charts and half-empty coffee cups. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant beeping of monitors and the soft hum of fluorescent lights. I sipped my lukewarm coffee, hoping the caffeine would fend off the fatigue settling behind my eyes. As I reviewed patient notes, a sound caught my attention, a faint, tinkling laugh echoing down the corridor. I lifted my head, listening intently. It sounded like a child's laughter, light and airy, completely out of place in the sterile environment of the hospital. That's odd, I murmured to myself. We didn't have any pediatric patients on this floor. The children's ward was in an entirely different wing. I stood up, the chair scraping softly against the linoleum. The laughter came again, slightly louder this time, seeming to drift from room 409, a room that, to my knowledge, was unoccupied due to the ongoing renovations. Grabbing my clipboard and flashlight, I decided to investigate. Perhaps a family had wandered into the wrong area, or maybe one of the staff was playing a prank. The hallways were dimly lit, the overhead lights casting long shadows that danced with each step I took. The air felt colder here, the chill intensifying as I approached the door of room 409. I hesitated outside the room, hand hovering over the doorknob. The laughter had stopped, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. Taking a deep breath, I turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room was dark, the only light coming from the hallway behind me. I flicked the switch on the wall, but nothing happened. Great, I thought. Another burned-out bulb. I stepped inside, sweeping the flashlight's beam across the room. It was empty, no bed, no equipment, just bare walls and a stripped floor. The windows were covered with heavy curtains that fluttered slightly, though there was no breeze. "Hello," I called out softly. "Is anyone here?" Silence. I shook my head, feeling a bit foolish. Clearly, my mind was playing tricks on me after too many hours without sleep. I turned to leave when, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. I swung the flashlight back toward the far corner of the room. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a small shadow dart out of sight, a child's silhouette. My heart began to race. "Who's there?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. No response. I took a tentative step forward, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. The beam of light quivered slightly as my hands trembled. I reached the corner and found nothing, just an empty space where shadows pooled like dark water. Suddenly, a soft giggle echoed behind me, closer this time. I spun around, but the room was as empty as before. "Okay, very funny," I said aloud. "If someone's trying to scare me, it's working." But deep down, I knew no one was there, at least, no one alive. A chill ran down my spine as I hurried out of the room, pulling the door shut behind me. Back in the hallway, the air felt lighter, the oppressive atmosphere lifting slightly. I returned to the nurse's station, my mind racing to rationalize what I'd experienced. "Just fatigue," I whispered, "an overactive imagination." I tried to focus on my work, but the incident gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. The rest of the night passed without event, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The following evening, I confided in my colleague, Lisa, about what had happened. She listened attentively, her expression thoughtful. "You know," she began cautiously, "you're not the first person to experience something like that in the East Wing. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? She glanced around before leaning in closer. There's a rumor among the staff about room 409. They say it's haunted by the spirit of a little girl who died there decades ago. I scoffed. Haunted? That's just hospital folklore. Lisa shrugged. Maybe, but too many people have reported strange occurrences for it to be mere coincidence. Unexplained sounds, laughter, even sightings of a child wandering the halls. I wanted to dismiss her words, but a part of me couldn't ignore the eerie encounter I'd had. Do you know anything about the girl? I asked reluctantly. Not much, just that she was a patient here in the 1950s and that she passed away in that room. Some say she was waiting for her parents who never came. A somber silence settled between us. That night, as I made my rounds, I couldn't help but feel a heightened sense of awareness. Every sound was amplified, the soft whoosh of the ventilation system, the distant chatter of staff, the echo of my footsteps on the polished floor. Around 3 a.m., I found myself standing outside room 409 once more. The door looked the same as any other, yet it seemed to emanate a quiet allure, drawing me in. Against my better judgment, I turned the handle and stepped inside. The room was just as empty as before. I stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of my own breathing. Then, faintly, I heard it, the giggle of a child, so soft it was almost imperceptible. Hello, I called out gently. My name is Emily. I'm a nurse here. Silence. I heard you laughing. I continued. Are you looking for someone? A slight rustling came from the corner, and I saw the outline of a small figure emerge from the shadows. She was no more than 6 years old, with dark hair cascading over her pale face. She wore a simple hospital gown, and her bare feet made no sound as she stepped toward me. My heart clenched, a mix of fear and compassion washing over me. Hi there, I said softly, kneeling to her level. What's your name? She tilted her head, eyes wide and expression unreadable. Lily, she whispered. Hello, Lily. Are you okay? She looked down, clutching a worn teddy bear to her chest. I can't find my mommy, she said, her voice tinged with sadness. My throat tightened. I'm sorry to hear that. Maybe I can help you find her. She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. Really? Of course, I replied, reaching out a hand. As she placed her tiny hand in mine, an icy chill shot up my arm. I suppressed a gasp, maintaining a gentle smile. Let's go see if we can find her, I suggested. We walked toward the door, but as we crossed the threshold, her grip loosened. I turned to look at her, but she had stopped at the doorway, hesitation clouding her face. What's wrong? I asked. I can't leave, she murmured. Why not? She glanced back into the room. I'm supposed to stay here. Who told you that? Before she could answer, footsteps echoed down the hallway. I looked up to see Dr. Matthews approaching, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. Emily, who are you talking to? He inquired. I turned back to gesture toward Lily, but she was gone. The hallway behind me was empty, and the chill in the air had vanished. I trailed off, realizing how it must have looked. Never mind. He gave me a puzzled look but didn't press further. Well, carry on then, he said before walking away. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had happened. Had I imagined the entire encounter? Felt so real, the touch of her hand, the sound of her voice. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that Lily was reaching out to me. I began researching the hospital's records, digging through old files in the dusty archives. After hours of searching, I found her, a patient file from 1952. Lily Anderson, age 6, admitted for pneumonia. She had passed away after complications from her illness. According to the notes, her parents had been killed in a car accident on their way to see her, a fact that had been kept from her during her treatment. My heart ached for the little girl trapped in a cycle of waiting, her spirit lingering in the place where she'd last hoped to see her family. That night, I returned to room 409 with a small bouquet of lilies and a teddy bear similar to the one she'd held. I placed them in the corner where I'd first seen her. "Lily," I called softly, "I found out what happened. Your mommy and daddy loved you very much. They're not here anymore, but you don't have to wait for them any longer." Silence enveloped the room. I closed my eyes, sending a silent prayer for her peace. When I opened them, she stood before me once more, a gentle smile on her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Will you stay with me until they come?" Tears welled in my eyes. "Of course," I replied. We sat together on the floor, and I told her stories about the stars, the flowers, anything to bring her comfort. Her form grew fainter as the hours passed, the first light of dawn creeping through the window. "Goodbye, Emily," she said softly. "I think I can go now." "Goodbye, Lily," I whispered, and then she was gone, the room feeling warmer and lighter than before. In the weeks that followed, the strange occurrences ceased. Room 409 was just another empty space awaiting renovation. But I knew that Lily had finally found peace. I never told anyone else about my experiences, fearing skepticism or disbelief, but I kept the teddy bear on my desk as a reminder, a symbol of the fragile boundary between our world and the next, and the small acts of kindness that can bridge the gap. Sometimes, late at night when the hospital is quiet, I think I hear a faint giggle echoing in the distance, but it's no longer filled with sorrow. Instead, it carries a note of joy, a reminder that some spirits, once lost, can find their way home. So if you ever find yourself wandering the quiet halls of an old hospital, listen closely to the whispers carried on the air. Respect the stories of those who came before, honor their memories, and understand that sometimes all they need is to be heard. Story number 4. The empty room still has running footsteps. I never considered myself a superstitious man. Growing up in the heart of Chicago, surrounded by the relentless noise and ceaseless motion of city life, tales of restless spirits and haunted buildings seemed like nothing more than old wives' stories meant to scare children or entertain the curious. My name is Daniel Carter, and for the past 3 years, I've been the night security guard at the Whitmore Building, an old, decaying structure nestled in a forgotten corner of Manhattan. The job was straightforward: monitor the premises, ensure no one trespassed after hours, and occasionally fix a flickering light or two. Nothing out of the ordinary, or so I thought. The Whitmore Building had a history, of course. Built in the early 1900s, it had once been a bustling office space for various businesses, but as the decades rolled by, it had fallen into disrepair. By the time I took the job, it was mostly vacant, with only a handful of tenants still holding onto their leases out of sheer stubbornness. The building's eerie silence at night was broken only by the occasional drip of a leaky faucet or the distant hum of traffic outside. My shift began at midnight, and I settled into my small, cluttered office on the top floor, the last to be vacated in the early morning hours. The window looked out over a narrow alleyway, a stretch of pavement that seemed to vanish into darkness. I liked the solitude, the chance to think without interruption, but there was an underlying sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake off. On my second week, strange things started happening. It began with small disturbances, doors that would creak open on their own, lights flickering without cause, and whispers echoing through the empty hallways. I chalked it up to the building's old wiring and my imagination playing tricks on me. But then came the footsteps. It was a Friday night, the kind where the wind howled through the broken windows, rattling the panes and sending shivers down my spine. I was reviewing some security footage, trying to catch any sign of unauthorized entry, when I heard it, a distinct sound of running footsteps echoing down the hallway. My heart skipped a beat. The building was supposed to be empty. Everyone had gone home hours ago. I grabbed my flashlight and headed towards the source of the noise. The footsteps grew louder as I approached the main corridor, the sound bouncing off the tall ceilings and empty offices. I followed the noise, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. casting long, ominous shadows on the walls. As I turned the corner, the sound abruptly stopped. I stood still, listening intently, but all was silent once more. I exhaled slowly, shaking off the tension, and began to walk back to my office. But then I saw him, a figure standing at the end of the hallway, dressed in an old-fashioned suit that looked like it belonged to another era. His face was obscured by the shadows, but his presence was undeniable. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" The man didn't respond. He remained motionless, staring directly at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I took a step closer, my flashlight trembling in my hand. As I approached, the figure began to fade, dissolving into the darkness until he was nothing but a memory. My breath quickened, and I spun around, half expecting him to reappear. But the hallway was empty. I hurried back to my office, my mind racing. Maybe I was just seeing things, the stress of the job getting to me. I tried to convince myself that the building's age and my isolation were to blame. But that night, the footsteps returned, louder and more insistent. They seemed to be coming from room 309, a space that had been vacant for years. Curiosity mixed with fear, I decided to investigate. I approached room 309, the footsteps growing louder with each step. My hand hovered over the doorknob, hesitating for a moment before I pushed the door open. The room was empty, dust-covered furniture arranged in a meticulous manner, as if someone had left in a hurry. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. As I stepped inside, the footsteps abruptly ceased, leaving an oppressive silence in their wake. I turned to leave, but then I noticed it. A message scrawled in what looked like dried blood on the wall. "Don't turn back." My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the room, but there was no one else there. The message was chilling, a stark reminder that I wasn't alone in this old building. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I decided to delve into the Whitmore building's history. I spent hours researching old newspapers, building records, and even spoke to a few elderly residents who remembered the place in its heyday. That's when I uncovered the tragic story of Thomas Whitmore, the building's original owner. Thomas Whitmore was a charismatic man who had built the Whitmore building from the ground up, envisioning it as a hub for innovation and progress. But his dreams were shattered in 1928 when a devastating fire broke out in the building, claiming the lives of 12 people, including Thomas himself. The fire had started in room 309, the very space I had just visited. The cause was never determined, and rumors of sabotage and foul play swirled around the incident. But nothing was ever proven. The tragedy left a mark on the building, an invisible scar that seemed to linger in the air. Locals whispered about the restless spirits of those who had perished, particularly the ghost of Thomas Whitmore, unable to move on from the nightmare that had taken so much from him. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to room 309, determined to confront whatever was causing the disturbances. As I entered, the temperature dropped sharply, my breath visible in the frigid air. I set up my flashlight and began documenting the room, hoping to catch something on camera. Hours passed in tense silence, the only sound my own breathing and the distant rumble of the city outside. Just as I was about to give up and leave, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of running footsteps, this time accompanied by soft, sorrowful crying. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. As the footsteps grew closer, the door to room 309 slammed shut behind me, plunging me into darkness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my flashlight, but it flickered and died, leaving me in total blackness. The crying intensified, the sound echoing around me, filling the room with a haunting melody of despair. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. The footsteps approached, their pace quickening until they stopped right outside the door. I could feel the presence of the ghostly figure, the man in the old suit, his sorrow palpable in the air. "Don't turn back," the voice of the wind seemed to carry, a ghostly echo that resonated deep within my soul. I realized that the message I had seen was a plea for help, a reminder that some doors should never be opened. With every ounce of strength, I pounded on the door, desperate to escape the torment inside. The door finally gave way, flinging open and allowing me to stumble out into the hallway. The footsteps ceased, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a heavy silence that filled the building once more. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I fled from room 309, running through the empty halls with adrenaline pumping through my veins. I made it back to my office, slamming the door shut and locking it behind me. My body trembled, and I knew that night would mark the end of my time at the Whitmore building. The next morning, I handed in my resignation, my mind still reeling from the events of the night before. The haunting presence of the faceless man and the sorrowful cries had pushed me to my breaking point. I couldn't stay in a place where the past refused to rest, where the ghosts of the forgotten still roamed the halls. Years have passed since that fateful night, and I've moved on to different jobs, different cities, but the memory of the Whitmore building and the shadows that lurked within remain etched in my mind. A constant reminder that some places hold secrets too dark to be uncovered, spirits too restless to find peace without acknowledgement and understanding. Sometimes, when the night is particularly quiet and the wind whispers through the trees, I catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a fleeting shadow, a distant cry, reminding me that the echoes of the past never truly fade. The story of the Whitmore building serves as a testament to the enduring power of memory and the importance of respecting the stories of those who came before us. So, if you ever find yourself working the night shift at an old, forgotten place, surrounded by the silence of history, listen closely to the whispers carried by the wind. Respect the stories of those who have lost their way. Honor their memories, and understand that some spirits seek only acknowledgement to finally rest in peace. For in the heart of isolation, the echoes of the lost linger, forever watching, forever remembering. Story number 5. Shadows in the deep. I never believed in ghosts. Growing up in the small town of Millstone, Pennsylvania, surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests, I was more focused on the tangible aspects of life: school, friendships, and eventually, the rugged work of mining that had been the backbone of our community for generations. My name is Jack Donovan, and for the past 12 years, I've been a miner at the Granite Ridge Quarry, a sprawling stone mine that carved its way deep into the earth beneath our town. The life of a miner is one of routine and resilience. Days blend into nights, and the rhythmic sounds of drills and heavy machinery become a constant backdrop. The camaraderie among the crew is strong, forged through shared hardship and the unspoken understanding that we all rely on each other to survive the unforgiving environment of the mine. But something changed about me during my 6th year at Granite Ridge, a subtle shift that I couldn't quite pinpoint until that fateful night. It was a cold October evening, the kind where the chill seeps into your bones and the scent of impending snow hangs heavy in the air. The mine was bustling more than usual, the anticipation of a new excavation shift bringing an extra layer of energy to the underground tunnels. As I prepared for my night shift, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the way the shadows seemed to stretch longer than usual, or the eerie silence that accompanied the usual sounds of drilling and machinery. We descended into the depths of Granite Ridge, the narrow elevator clanging softly as it took us down to the main shaft. The familiar sight of the vast, dimly lit cavern greeted me, the walls slick with moisture and the air thick with the scent of stone and sweat. My fellow miners greeted me with nods and murmurs, their faces lined with the exhaustion of another long day. I settled into my spot near pump number 7, the heart of our operations, responsible for circulating air and maintaining the delicate balance necessary for our work. The hours ticked by in a blur of monotony, the only interruptions being the distant sounds of heavy machinery and the occasional announcement over the radio. As midnight approached, the mine seemed to grow quieter, the ambient noise fading into an oppressive silence that pressed against my eardrums. That's when I first heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible sound, like footsteps echoing through the tunnels. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained to listen. The sound was distant, but unmistakable. It was the rhythm of someone walking, slow and deliberate, yet out of place in the otherwise empty mine. I glanced around, but all I saw were the familiar faces of my coworkers. Oblivious to the noise, I shook my head, trying to dismiss the unease that settled in my gut. Maybe it was just the creaks and groans of the old mine settling for the night. I forced myself to focus on my work, but the footsteps persisted, growing louder and closer with each passing minute. My pulse quickened, and I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. "Hey, Tom," called out one of my coworkers, snapping me back to reality. "You hearing this too?" I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, I'm hearing footsteps, but there's nobody here." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their eyes darting around the cavernous space. We tried to carry on with our tasks, but the sound of the footsteps lingered, an unsettling presence that seemed to follow us wherever we went. As I worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that someone or something was moving through the mine alongside us. About an hour into my shift, the air grew colder, the temperature dropping suddenly as if an icy hand had reached into the depths of the mine. I wrapped my coat tighter around me, the chill biting at my skin. The footsteps had stopped, replaced by a heavy silence that felt almost suffocating. I glanced around, expecting to see someone, but the tunnels remained empty. That's when I saw him, a shadowy figure standing at the far end of the tunnel, just beyond the reach of our headlights. He was dressed in old-fashioned mining gear, his face obscured by the brim of his hard hat. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, staring directly at me with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. I felt a surge of fear, my instincts screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't obey, my body frozen in place as I stared back at the apparition. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as the figure remained motionless, his presence a chilling reminder of the mine's haunted past. Gathering every ounce of courage, I took a step forward, breaking the paralysis that held me captive. The figure watched me intently, his eyes never leaving mine. As I moved closer, I realized with a jolt of horror that his face was completely blank. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin stretched taut over his skull, an empty void where his features should have been. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice cracking with fear. "What do you want?" The faceless man didn't respond. Instead, he lifted a hand, pointing down the tunnel in front of me. My heart pounded in my chest as I followed his gaze, seeing nothing but the dark expanse of the mine stretching out before us. A sudden gust of wind blew through the tunnel, scattering loose rocks and debris. The temperature dropped even further, the air now thick with an otherworldly chill. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to steady my nerves. "I need to go," I said, turning to back away from the figure. But as I did, the faceless man began to move, gliding silently down the tunnel towards me. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what was happening. Was this a ghost? A hallucination brought on by the isolation and stress of the job? Or something far more sinister? I turned to flee, but the tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly, the exit nowhere in sight. The faceless man was gaining on me, his presence growing more oppressive with each step. The walls around us seemed to close in, the darkness becoming suffocating as I struggled to find my way back to safety. In a moment of desperation, I ducked into a nearby alcove, my heart hammering in my chest as I tried to catch my breath. The footsteps ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that filled the space. I pressed myself against the cold stone wall, trying to calm my racing thoughts, but the fear remained, a constant presence that refused to let me rest. Minutes passed in tense stillness before I heard a soft whisper, a voice barely audible over the distant hum of the mine. "Remember us!" I snapped out of my daze, the words echoing in my mind like a haunting refrain. The faceless man was gone, but the message lingered, a chilling reminder of the mine's dark history and the restless spirits that still roamed its depths. The rest of my shift passed in a blur, the footsteps never returning but the sense of being watched never fully dissipating. When morning finally arrived, I emerged from the mine, exhausted and shaken by the events of the night. My co-workers listened with a mix of skepticism and unease as I recounted my encounter, their expressions growing somber as I spoke of the faceless man and the haunting message that followed. Over the next few days, I delved deeper into the mine's history, determined to understand the truth behind the ghostly presence. I learned about the tragic accident that had occurred a decade ago, a catastrophic collapse that had claimed the lives of 12 miners, including the man whose ghost I had encountered. The incident had been shrouded in mystery, with theories ranging from faulty equipment to supernatural intervention. But no definitive answers had ever been found. The miners who had survived the collapse were forever changed, their bodies and minds scarred by the trauma. Many of them had left the industry altogether, unable to reconcile the loss and the guilt that weighed heavily on them. Those who remained often spoke in hushed tones about the spirits that lingered in the mine, their presence a constant reminder of the lives lost and the fragility of human existence. Armed with this knowledge, I felt a responsibility to honor the memory of those who had perished and to bring closure to the restless spirits that still haunted Granite Ridge. I approached the mine's management with my findings, suggesting that we hold a memorial service to acknowledge the lives lost and to offer a gesture of respect and remembrance. To my surprise, the management agreed, albeit reluctantly. We organized a small ceremony, inviting the families of the fallen miners and the remaining crew members to join us in paying our respects. We placed flowers and candles near pump number 3, the very spot where the faceless man had first appeared, and we spoke words of remembrance and gratitude for the lives that had been lost. As the ceremony concluded, I felt a sense of peace settle over the mine, a tangible shift in the atmosphere that signaled the beginning of closure for the spirits trapped within. The faceless man no longer appeared, and the oppressive presence that had once filled the tunnels was replaced by a calm serenity that seemed to breathe new life into the old mine. Weeks turned into months, and the haunting presence that had once terrorized me faded into the background, becoming a distant memory of a night when reality and the supernatural had collided in the depths of Granite Ridge. The mine continued to operate, the echoes of the past now a part of its storied legacy rather than a source of fear and dread. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving back from a long haul and the road is quiet, I catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure in my rearview mirror, a reminder that some spirits never fully find peace and that the echoes of the past still linger, watching and waiting in the darkness. So, if you ever find yourself working the night shift in an old, forgotten place, listen closely to the whispers carried by the wind. Respect the stories of those who have lost their way. Honor their memories, and understand that some spirits seek only acknowledgement to finally rest in peace. For in the heart of isolation, the shadows hold secrets too dark to be forgotten, and the echoes of the lost continue to roam, forever searching for peace amidst the endless night. Story number 6. Echoes in Aisle 5. I never believed in ghosts, growing up in the vibrant heart of Los Angeles, surrounded by the relentless pace of city life and the comforting hum of modernity. Tales of restless spirits and haunted places seemed like nothing more than old wives' stories meant to scare children or entertain curious minds. My name is Sarah Martinez, and for the past 2 years, I've been working the night shift at Horizon Supermarket, a sprawling retail giant nestled on the outskirts of San Diego. The job was straightforward: restock shelves, assist late-night customers, and ensure the store remained clean and orderly until the early morning crowds arrived. But everything changed one fateful night when reality and the supernatural collided in the most unexpected way. Horizon Supermarket wasn't anything special. It was a large store with countless aisles, each meticulously organized and brightly lit. The night shifts were the quietest, with only a handful of customers browsing the aisles or making late-night snack runs. Most nights, I found solace in the routine, the rhythmic stocking of shelves, the soft beeping of scanners, and the occasional hum of the fluorescent lights above. The solitude was comforting, a chance to decompress after long, hectic days. That particular night was no different. The clock struck midnight as I was restocking the cereal aisle, arranging boxes of Cheerios and Frosted Flakes in neat rows. The store was almost empty, save for an elderly man browsing the frozen foods and a young couple arguing over which brand of coffee to buy. I sighed, wiping my brow with the back of my hand, enjoying the relative peace. As I turned to move to the next aisle, I heard a faint, almost imperceptible sound of footsteps echoing through the store. First, I dismissed it as the distant noise of traffic or perhaps another employee passing by. But then I realized something was off. The footsteps were coming from aisle 5, the dairy section, where I usually didn't encounter many late-night shoppers. Curiosity piqued. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way toward aisle 5. The store was dimly lit, the bright lights casting long shadows that danced with each step I took. As I approached the dairy section, the footsteps grew louder, more distinct, marching with purpose and direction. My heart began to race, a mix of anxiety and unease settling in my stomach. I reached aisle 5 and scanned the area with my flashlight. The dairy products were neatly arranged, the chill from the refrigerators making the air feel colder against my skin. But there was no one in sight. The footsteps had stopped abruptly, leaving me in a heavy silence that pressed down on me like a physical weight. "Hello," I called out, my voice wavering slightly. "Is someone here?" No response. I took a cautious step forward, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. My mind raced with possibilities, perhaps a customer hiding or someone playing a prank. But deep down, I felt a creeping sense of dread that something was terribly wrong. As I moved deeper into the aisle, the lights flickered, and the temperature seemed to drop even further. My breath became visible in the cold air as I exhaled sharply, the chill seeping into my bones. I reached the end of the aisle and swung my flashlight toward the back wall, where the refrigerators stood tall and imposing. That's when I saw him, a shadowy figure standing between the tall dairy units, his presence unmistakable yet ghostly. He was dressed in an old-fashioned suit, the kind you'd see in black and white movies, his face obscured by the shadows. His eyes, though hidden, seemed to bore into mine, an unspoken plea etched into his very being. My heart pounded in my chest as I took a hesitant step closer. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. The figure didn't respond. Instead, he began to move toward me, his steps slow and deliberate, the floorboards creaking under his weight. I felt a chill run down my spine, the air around me growing heavier with each passing second. As he drew nearer, the details became clearer. His tie was slightly askew, his shoes polished to a shine, and his demeanor one of profound sadness. "Please," a voice echoed in my mind, though no sound reached my ears. "Don't forget." I recoiled, my instincts screaming at me to run, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. The figure stopped just a few feet away, his presence overwhelming, and then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he vanished, leaving behind an oppressive silence and a lingering sense of sorrow that filled the aisle. Shaken, I stumbled back, my heart racing as I tried to process what had just happened. "What do you want?" I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. "Why are you here?" Before I could gather my thoughts, a soft cry echoed through the aisle, a child's wail that pierced the silence and sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced around, but there was no one else in sight. The store felt colder, the shadows deeper, and the feeling of being watched intensified. I backed away slowly, my mind racing to make sense of the encounter. "Maybe it's just my imagination," I muttered, trying to calm myself, but deep down, I knew it was something more, something tied to the store's past, a lingering presence unable to move on. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to do some research. Over the next few days, I delved into the history of Horizon Supermarket, scouring old newspapers and local archives for any mention of unusual incidents or tragedies. That's when I stumbled upon a heartbreaking story from 20 years ago, a tragic accident that had occurred in aisle 5. The article detailed a severe power outage that had struck the store one stormy night, causing the refrigeration units to fail and leading to the rapid spoilage of perishable goods. In the chaos that ensued, a man named Thomas Green had lost his life when he slipped on a wet floor, his body crushed beneath a fallen display of dairy products. The incident had been quickly covered up by the management, but rumors of a restless spirit had persisted among former employees and local residents. Thomas Green, it seemed, had never found peace, his spirit forever tied to the aisle where he had met his untimely demise. The shadowy figure I had seen was his restless apparition, a silent reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded in the very place I worked. Armed with this knowledge, I felt a responsibility to honor his memory and help his spirit find peace. That night, as the clock struck midnight, I returned to aisle 5, the weight of the past pressing down on me. I stood in the center of the aisle, my flashlight steady in my hand, and called out softly, "Thomas, if you're here, I'm sorry for what happened. I want to help you find peace." The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the air heavy with unspoken sorrow. The lights flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance around me. And then, the figure appeared once more, Thomas Green, his presence both haunting and sorrowful. "I can't forget." The voice of the wind seemed to carry, echoing in my mind. "I need to be remembered." Tears welled in my eyes as I took a step closer. "You're not forgotten, Thomas. I promise to remember your story and honor your memory." The figure paused, his hollow eyes meeting mine with a depth of emotion that transcended the physical realm. Slowly, he began to fade, the oppressive presence lifting as his form dissolved into the shadows. "Thank you," his voice whispered, a final farewell that resonated deep within me. As dawn broke, the store felt lighter, the lingering sense of sorrow replaced by a serene calm. I knew then that I had played a part in helping a restless spirit find closure. His story now a part of the store's legacy rather than a source of fear. In the weeks that followed, the strange occurrences in aisle 5 ceased. The shadowy figure was never seen again, and the oppressive atmosphere that had once haunted me lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and respect for the history that surrounded me. I shared Thomas Green's story with my colleagues and the few regular customers, ensuring that his memory was honored and his tragic tale was no longer a forgotten whisper. But sometimes, late at night when the store is quiet and the shadows stretch long across the aisles, I catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a fleeting shadow, a soft whisper, reminding me that the echoes of the past never truly fade. The Horizon supermarket, with its endless aisles and bright lights, holds more stories than any of us can imagine, some of which linger in the shadows, waiting to be remembered and respected. So, if you ever find yourself working the night shift in a quiet, forgotten place, listen closely to the whispers carried by the wind. Respect the stories of those who have lost their way. Honor their memories, and understand that some spirits seek only acknowledgement to finally rest in peace. For in the heart of isolation, the echoes of the past linger, forever watching, forever remembering.